Welcome back to Mode Bespoke. I'm Atenas. For today's project, we're going to be working on a very simple but very lovely Tunisian crochet scarf. So let's get started. So here's a look at the scarf we're going to be crocheting today. And like I said earlier in the video, it is a very simple scarf. All you need to know is how to crochet two different stitches. The first one is a knit stitch and then a purl stitch. Now, you're going to need a few supplies in order to create this scarf. So we're going to start with the yarn. Now you can use any size yarn you want. For this tutorial, I'm using a size 4 or a medium worsted yarn. Now the hook will depend on whatever yarn size you use. So check the label on your yarn and use that recommended hook size. I'm going to be using a 6.5mm Tunisian hook. So here we go. You do not need to use a corded hook. However, you will need a Tunisian hook. The hook needs to be long enough so that you can fit all of the stitches for the width of the scarf. You're going to need a second hook. Tunisian, regular, doesn't matter. It needs to be at least 1mm smaller than your Tunisian hook, and this is for the border. Now, the initial chain is going to determine the width of your scarf, and you're going to add length by crocheting rows. We're going to begin with a slip knot, so wrap the yarn around 2 fingers, insert your hook behind the top or front loop, grab the yarn in the back, pull through, and then just tighten the knot by pulling on the threads individually. You're going to crochet a chain in multiples of 7. So it's going to be multiples of 7 plus 2. I'm going to crochet 3 multiples of 7, so I'm going to crochet 21 stitches plus 2 at the end. To crochet a chain, wrap the yarn around your hook like this. You're going to pull this top thread right here through this bottom one for 1. So yarn over, pull through for 2, yarn over, pull through for 3, and continue until you crochet as many multiples of 7 as you need or want to crochet whatever width you want for your scarf. Once you complete your chain, add 2 additional stitches at the end. So here's my chain of 21 stitches. I'm going to add my plus 2 at the end. Remember, it is multiples of 7 plus 2. So we've got 22, 23. So I have a chain with a total of 23 stitches. We're going to begin a foundation row, and this is just a standard foundation row, so you skip your very first stitch on the chain. You're going to insert your hook into the second stitch, so insert the hook into the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop to cast on 1. You're going to repeat this in every stitch of the chain. If you need to see this again, let's do it a little more slowly. We're going to insert the hook into the stitch, you're going to yarn over, and pull up a loop. Once you have finished casting on stitches, you're going to work on your return pass. This is going to be a standard return pass. So you're going to begin with yarn over and pull through 1 loop. Now for the rest of these loops, you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. So yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over, pull through 2 until you are left with just 1 loop on your hook. When you complete your return pass, your foundation row is going to look like this. Now to begin row 1, we are going to skip the very first vertical stitch of the row. So this one right here, you already have that on your hook. It's right here. Now beginning on that second vertical stitch, we are going to knit 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, and for those of you that need to see the knit stitch, here's the vertical stitch. It's made up of 2 legs or 2 loops. You've got the back one, the front one. You're going to insert your hook in between the legs of the stitch all the way towards the back, yarn over, and pull up a loop. I have a total of 5 loops on my hook, so we have knit stitch 4. We had the first loop already on our hook. Now we're going to purl 2. So to purl, you're going to reverse yarn over. So pull the yarn in front of your hook. Normally a yarn over is pulled through on the back. This is a reverse yarn over, so hold the yarn in front of your hook. Hold it down, and then you're going to insert your hook behind the top leg or the front leg of your vertical stitch. Release your yarn, pull it under and then behind your hook, and then yarn over. And this is a regular yarn over with the yarn behind the hook. Pull the top thread through the loop like this, and there you go. That is a purl stitch. Now for the next purl stitch, again, reverse yarn over, insert your hook behind the front leg of the stitch, release the yarn, pull it under the vertical stitch, then behind your hook, regular yarn over, and pull through the stitch. And those were your 2 purl stitches. So again, 4 knit and then 2 purl. Now the rest of the row, you're going to repeat the same sequence, and that is 5 knit stitches and 2 purl. So we begin with our 5 knit stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you purl 2. So reverse yarn over and purl 1 and purl 2. And then you just repeat. So knit 5, purl 2. When you get to the end of the row, which let me finish these 2 purl stitches, you are going to be left with 1 vertical stitch. So here it is. There's 1 vertical stitch plus the final stitch of the row, which is this last one right here. So you're going to knit stitch in that last vertical stitch, and then you cast on into the final stitch of the row, which is this one. So just insert your hook behind the side legs right here, like this, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Once you have cast on all of your stitches, you work your return pass. For those of you that need to count your loops, you should always be casting on the same number of loops as you did initial chains. So I had an initial chain of 23 stitches, which means I always need to have 23 loops on my hook at the end of every row. So, okay, now to work the return pass, again, it's just a regular return pass. So yarn over, pull through 1, and then for the rest of the row, yarn over, pull through 2, until you are left with just the 1 loop on your hook. Let's take a look at row 2. Now from here on out, let's take a look here at our purl stitches. We are going to be shifting these over 1 stitch. So as you can see here, the design creates a diagonal, diagonal stripes. I guess that's the best way to call them. So we're going to be moving those purl stitches over by 1 stitch every row, which means that for row number 2, we're going to knit stitch 3 stitches instead of 4 like we did in the previous row. Skip the first vertical stitch right here and begin on the second one with 1 knit stitch. So we have 1 and the next 2 and then 3. So we have a total of 4 loops on our hook. And then you're going to get to this section. So you're going to have 1 last knit stitch right here, followed by your 2 purls. So here's the 2 purl stitches. Since we have to shift these over 1 stitch, we're going to purl in that knit stitch. So we're going to purl right in here. So let me just pull that one there. So there's 1 purl stitch. We need a second purl stitch because there's always 2. And you purl in the next one. So now that we have our 2 stitches, as you can see, we've shifted them over 1 stitch. We can continue the rest of the sequence. Now the sequence is 5 knit, 2 purl. So right in this next purl stitch, we're going to begin our first knit. So just insert your hook into the stitch. So we knit 1 and then continue. So we have 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you're going to purl the next 2 stitches. So it's going to look the same as what we just did previously when we shifted the stitches over. You're going to be left with that 1 vertical stitch, which was a knit stitch in the previous row, and then followed by your 2 purls. So you're going to purl in the knit, purl in the purl, and then you begin your next sequence in that second purl stitch. So begin your knit right here for the sequence of 5 plus 2. All right, so I've got my 2 purl stitches, and then I just knit 5. So here's that purl. I'm going to begin my first knit stitch right here. So we have 1, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5. The end of the row is going to look like this. So you'll have your purl stitch, and then these last 2 stitches of the row, so we have these last 2 plus your final stitch, you're going to knit. So knit 1 here, and then cast on in this final stitch. So knit, knit, and then cast on. And then you just complete your return pass. So for row number 3, we are shifting our stitches over 1 more stitch. So we're going to begin with 2 knit stitches. And then we get to this section where we've got that last knit stitch and the purl stitches. Sorry, I keep wanting to call them reverse stitches because in Spanish it's a reverse stitch. But you do your 2 purl stitches and then you begin your sequence of 5 and 2. So knit 5, purl 2 until you get to the end of the row. After your last 2 purl stitches, we're going to be left with 3 stitches, and we're going to knit into each one of those and then cast on in the final stitch of the row and then complete your return pass. For row number 4, we're going to begin with 1 knit stitch, and then we shift the purl stitches over. So we purl 1, purl 2, and then you begin your 5-2 sequence. When you reach the end of the row, so here are my last 2 purl stitches, I'm going to be left with 4 vertical stitches, so I'm going to knit 4 and then cast on into the final stitch of the row. For row number 5, we're going to begin with a purl stitch. So see, that very first stitch is a knit. We have to turn this into the purl, so we purl 1, purl 2, and then begin the 5-2 sequence. Once you reach that final pair of purl stitches right before the end of the row, you're going to be left with 5 knit stitches. So we'll knit, or I guess 5 vertical stitches that you would then knit into. I can't speak today. And then you cast on into that final stitch and create your return pass. Now for row number 6, we're going to have to continue to shift our purl stitches, but this time you're only going to purl 1. So we purl into that second vertical stitch of the row, and then see that completes this diagonal for, I guess, this section of the diagonal, and then you would begin your 5-2 sequence. So I will knit 5, purl 2, and continue until I complete the row. Once you reach those last 2 purl stitches, you're going to knit into 5 stitches, and you're going to be left with just 1 vertical stitch here at the end before you reach your final stitch of the row. Purl into that last vertical stitch, and then cast on into the final stitch, and complete a return pass. Now for row number 7, and this is our final row, you're going to begin with the 5-2 sequence. So you're going to knit 5, purl 2, and continue until you get to the end of the row. Here on out, all you need to do is repeat rows 1 through 7 until you've created a scarf in whatever length you want. So for a traditional sized scarf, you can do 50 inches or longer. So 50 inches would be about 127 centimeters-ish. If you want a short scarf, just crochet and try on the scarf as you work until you reach whatever length you want. All right, so we're at the end of row number 7, and we have 2 vertical stitches left. We have to shift those purl stitches over by 1 stitch. So I'm going to purl here. I'm going to purl in the last vertical stitch, and then I'm going to cast on in that final stitch of the row and complete my return pass. So here's what it looks like once you've completed that return pass. As you can see, you're starting to notice the diagonal lines that run across. Now all you would do is repeat rows 1 through 7, and when you reach the length you need for your scarf, or the length that you want for your scarf, you're going to crochet a bind off row. Now the bind off row is going to be a combination knit stitch and single crochet. So you're going to cast on the stitch as a knit stitch and close it as a single crochet. So skip your first vertical stitch, knit stitch in the next available stitch. Once you have 2 loops on your hook, you're going to close this as a single crochet. So you are going to yarn over and pull this yarn through these 2 stitches to single crochet. So then you repeat this in every stitch along your row. So you knit stitch until you have 2 stitches, or not 2 stitches, 2 loops on your hook, and then you single crochet. So knit and then yarn over, pull through 2. You're going to knit stitch in every single stitch. So whether it is a purl stitch or a knit stitch, it doesn't matter. You knit stitch to cast on that 1 loop. So like right here, I knit stitch into a purl and then finished off the stitch with a single crochet. So there's your bind off. Complete the bind off, and then I'll show you how to start the border. So I have reached that final stitch of the row, and I'm just going to single crochet into this stitch. And now what we're going to do for the rest of the border is we're going to have to chain 1, turn our work around, and work in the opposite direction. And this is going to be just regular crochet now. So chain 1, turn your work around, and this is where we're going to have to switch stitches, or not stitches, hooks. I'm telling you, I can't speak today. So switch your Tunisian hook out, grab a regular hook or a smaller Tunisian hook, whatever you have handy, so long as this hook is smaller than your Tunisian hook. Alright, so let's work on this border. Beginning on the very first stitch of the row, you are going to single crochet. So insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2. So single crochet into every stitch along the top part, or the top border, I guess, of the scarf. And then I'll see you when you get to that corner stitch. All right, so I'm at the quarter stitch and you're going to single crochet 3 into this final stitch right here. So we begin with 1, and then we've got 2 and 3. And this is going to give us a little turn right here so that we can go smoothly into the side of the scarf. So now when you crochet into the side of the scarf, it's going to look like this. So make sure that when you're crocheting, you're working into this little triangle here along the top, not this bottom one, but right up here. You're going to single crochet into each one of those side stitches. So just beginning like this. So you should only have 2 threads of yarn like this on your hook. All right, so single crochet all the way along the side of the scarf. And then for those of you that are a little more experienced, once you get to the corner stitch, single crochet 3 and then just complete the rest of the border the same way. Now for those of you that need to see this corner stitch again, so here's the corner stitch. We're going to single crochet 3 into that same stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3. This is going to make a nice little corner right here. And you're going to single crochet all along this edge of the scarf. So continue to single crochet 3 into this corner and then continue this side of the border until you reach this very first stitch right there. All right, so I've completed the rest of the border and I've reached this, well, second to last stitch. So here's the last stitch. I'm just going to single crochet in here. And once I've completed my single crochet, it's going to look like this. You're going to chain 1. This is going to make a small knot down here. And then you're going to tighten it up, cut your yarn, and you're going to pull your hook along with your yarn. So you're going to end up with a loose thread like this one, if I can find it, like that one. Weave in your ends, and then you're done. So if you don't know how to weave in ends, there's a tutorial. I'll link it down in the description box below. But if you just need me to kind of walk you through it real quick, you're going to thread your yarn needle and you're going to stitch right along the back side right here in the shape of a square. Use the stitching for the return pass. So go through, stitch a few squares, and then cut your yarn, and then you're ready. And that's it. Now, a few notes about the yarn, because we are so close to Christmas, and some of you might be doing this as a last-minute gift. Now, this dark blue one, I used a fingering yarn. So it was a fingering yarn and a 5mm, 3mm hook combination. Here's what it looks like in the front and the back. Now, it is a very soft and silky scarf, but it took forever to make. So it took me anywhere between 35 to 40 hours to make this scarf. So if that's not the time frame that you've got, here are your options. So if you need to crochet the scarf a bit quicker, use a thicker yarn, like we did here for the tutorial. So this was a size 4 or medium worsted yarn. I only stitched 3 multiples of 7, so I did 21 stitches plus 2, so it was a total of 23 stitches across. If you're going to use a lighter yarn, whether it's a DK or anything else, you're going to have to adjust those multiples. Now for this fingering yarn, I did 6 multiples of 7, so 7 times 6 for 42, plus 2 at the end, a total of 44 stitches. The stitching was much, much smaller, so my rows and everything was a lot more compacted and condensed, so it took me a lot longer to crochet than it would if I would have used the bigger yarn. So just some notes in case you're in a bit of a time crunch and you want to finish this scarf quickly. Bigger yarn, so size 4 and go from there. That's it. This is our last tutorial for the year. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram if you'd like to see any more of my work. But yes, have a very Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all again next year.